The centre cannot hold. All over the world, centrist politicians and governments are sinking into the swamp of their own making, a swamp of neoliberal economic policies and neoconservative imperial policies abroad. Just the recent examples may suffice. President Macron was again humiliated in an election he called himself to try and expunge his previous humiliation just a couple of weeks before in the European Parliament election. He came third, and a distant third, with barely 20% of the vote. My equivalent in France, Monsieur Mélenchon, coming in at about 28.5, but the right-wing populist leader Marine Le Pen well ahead, and even may get a majority in the National Assembly, something not easy to get. But it's over. The party is over for little Macron. As for Germany, well, little soldier Schulz and bonkers Baerbock, the most stupid pair ever to lead a developed Western country. Oh no, wait, that would be Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So let me refine it to European, the most stupid European leaders we have ever seen. Baerbock and Schulz barely have 20% between them, between both of their parties. They simply cannot withstand the electoral forces that are coming their way from, in Germany's case, the right and the left. And we may come to that later. But the most spectacular example has to be the meltdown of Joe Biden's presidency. You might call it the cremation of Joe Biden, if that's not in poor taste. But he did look like a corpse to me. There he was on the stage for a debate that he had challenged Donald Trump to, and Trump, a bull in a china shop if ever you saw and heard one, was rampant, whilst Butcher Genocide Joe was completely comatose. And there's now talk that Joe Biden will be pulling out of the election altogether. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump is good. Trump is bad, very, very bad. It's that the centrists of the Democratic Party, with their endless wars, with their poverty and poverty of imagination, what could be in the mighty and wealthy country of the United States, who have sunk themselves. British general elections coming up on Thursday, and I'm a candidate, so I'll watch what I say. But let's be clear. Insofar as the centrist Labour Party will win, it's just because they are not the Conservatives, who've been in power for 14 years and have self-evidently exhausted any good that they might do. And for the establishment, there's nothing to lose, because both the Conservatives and Labour stand for exactly the same things. And they've made sure about that. They destroyed the Labour leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, absolutely eviscerated it. Not just Corbyn himself, but all of his lieutenants. They have all been either expelled from Labour or have been marginalised to the point of virtual invisibility. So now that they've made Labour safe for imperialism, well, they might as well give it a try. So it will be a changing of the guards, only in the way that Tweedledee and Tweedledum are two apparently different people, and yet absolutely identical. So in Britain, we'll have a challenge from the Le Pen end of the political spectrum in the form of Nigel Farage's Reform Party, blaming everything on immigrants, blaming everything on Muslims in particular. Say anything against Nigel Farage, you will be astounded at the tidal wave of Islamophobic, racist filth that will come your way. Farage himself is a bit more careful, watches his P's and Q's. Normally, though not always. But the core feature of Farage's right-wing populist campaign is that there are too many black and brown people in Britain. The left populists, well, that will be me. I stand in defense of people of color, in defense of people of faith, and in opposition to the endless wars of the centrists around the world. You've come to the right place if you're interested in these things. This is Have It Out with Galloway. Lee Camp is the most censored comedian in America, and it's no wonder. Not only is he a better comedian and commentator than almost anybody else, but he's bang on the money, hitting the bullseye every time in the political critiques that he makes. But he'll never be censored here on Have It Out with Galloway. Lee, it's wonderful to see you again. Last time we met, it was in Beijing in China when we attended together a very important conference. I expect that we'll run into each other sometime over the summer. I wanted to ask you about the disaster that befell Joe Biden on the debate stage in Atlanta last week. Your thoughts, please.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Mr. Galloway. And I'm glad we're speaking in a time where we have a free Julian Assange as well. In terms of the debate, I mean, it just was overwhelmingly clear that we Americans now live in a dying, lying empire. The presidential debate perfectly epitomized this. It was as you said, the corpse versus the clown. It was vomit versus diarrhea. It was gonorrhea versus chlamydia. And that's what we get to choose from. And even the corporate mainstream media, that their entire job as servile flatterers to power is to try and prop up these lunatics and make them look like reasonable statesmen. Even they had abandoned Joe Biden and, of course, Donald Trump as anything other than clowns and corpses. Even CNN was done with the idea that Joe Biden or Donald Trump could even manage a convenience store. I don't know that anyone thinks either of them could. And those of us who had the stomach to actually watch the entire thing, the entire hour and a half of elder abuse and narcissistic megalomaniacal lunacy, we did not come out better. The losers of this debate were absolutely the American people. But I guess on the plus side, you could actually see what it is that America stands for these days.
And yet, Lee, these same commentators now ditching Biden, the New York Times, the New Yorker, the big fancy papers, these are the people who were telling us even a week ago that behind closed doors, Joe was as sharp as a tack, and no one could keep up with him. They're left with egg on their face, are they not? Or do they count on the fact that not many people notice?
I think they know everyone noticed. The question is whether we should now believe more lies saying that it was just one day and he had a bad day. It is so clear this is a diminished human being. I mean, my grandmother, God rest her soul, she had about similar mental acuity at that age. And here's the thing, she wasn't president of the United States. We took the knobs off her oven so she wouldn't hurt herself. It is time to take the knobs off of Joe Biden's oven, as well as Donald Trump's, for that matter. And of course, I don't know if you want to talk about it, there are third-party candidates, but they're not allowed by the mainstream media or the ruling elite of the United States to be anywhere near the actual election. They're not allowed on the debate stage. They're not allowed in the media. So really, we choose between these two absolutely garbage candidates that are owned by the same corporate entities.
We will come to those, and indeed to Trump, but I want to stick on Biden just for a minute because he went off into Camp David to a family retreat where he was taking counsel from his closest advisor, who turns out to be Hunter Biden, the crack-smoking convicted felon. He turns out to be the man to whom Joe Biden listens most closely. God help you in America if that is true. But what do you think will come of all this cogitation? Will Biden be forced to stand down, or will all these fancy papers have to eat their words and get back behind him?
It's anyone's guess. I'd say it's roughly 50-50. There are some big calls to have him step down, to have him give it up and admit that he should be put out to pasture. But there are others that continue to say that, oh, it's too difficult at this late date, which is not that late, to change the presidential candidate. I can guarantee you that if he stays in the race, he will be obliterated by Donald Trump. It will be a landslide. But I guess the important note at the end of it is whether he remains in or whether he does not remain in. Not a lot will change, no matter whether you have a Democrat or Republican in that White House. They are owned by the same corporate entities, the same big banks, the same big ag, the same big oil. And so you're going to get a lot of similar decisions. And in that debate where they pretended to have differences between themselves, I'll just give one example: climate crisis, climate change, where Donald Trump said, you are holding back oil and gas. Joe Biden said, oh, we abide by the Paris Accord or what. None of it mattered. Actually, Joe Biden has allowed more oil drilling than Donald Trump. So if you actually look at the facts, there's a little hair's width of difference between these two goons. And yet though that hair's width is what we're supposed to decide upon for this presidential election.
Let's turn to the other goon then. On the principle that a stopped clock is right twice a day, Trump is right on the Ukraine and wrong on everything else. And although they say he never started any new wars, he sure killed a lot of folks. And of course, one of them, the assassination attack that he made on important Iranian officials, could well have led to world war. He sent cruise missiles into Syria on an absolutely bogus prospectus. He pulled America out of the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. He pulled out of the Iranian nuclear deal. He's a reckless bull in a china shop. And just because he's right on Ukraine, for which we give thanks, doesn't mean that he's not going to blow us all up on the other fronts, does it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is not an anti-war candidate versus a pro-war candidate. These are both blood-soaked war criminals. It's tough to always know the numbers because the Pentagon hides a lot of them, but we do know that tens of thousands of bombs were dropped on innocent people under Donald Trump's guidance, and tens of thousands are dropped every year by Joe Biden and by Obama. It does not seem to change largely, no matter who is in that White House. And of course, Donald Trump also endorses the genocide going on in Gaza. And for me, that's a red line. And I don't think that should be an outlandish statement to say if someone's going to endorse genocide and send thousands and thousands of bombs to rain down on children, that can be a red line for I'm not going to cast my vote or support that person. And yeah, they are both blood-soaked entities, and the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, does not change much at all under Democrat or Republican. You have over $1 trillion, if you count the black budgets, dumped into war and death and destruction every single year. It is an unfathomable amount of money and bombs and death and killing. And there's very little difference, maybe a little on Ukraine, like you said, but very little difference between the two.
It is, of course, Genocide Joe versus Zion Dawn. We kind of already knew that. The big surprise for me is the candidate who, in other circumstances, might well have been a genuine contender, namely Robert Kennedy Jr. had the magic of the Kennedy name, an anti-corporate critique that was sharp and and clever one, an opposition to almost all wars except the genocide in Gaza. I find it, especially after what happened to his father and indeed his uncle, I find it unfathomable, to use your word, how Kennedy blew it all, made it impossible for people like you or me and millions of others to give him any support in order to be more Netanyahu than Netanyahu. How does that compute?
It's very tough to be more Netanyahu than Netanyahu. You are right. And I don't know what his calculation is or how he made the decisions he made. And it was pre-October 7th. I'll remind everybody that too, that he was saying things that were an absolute non-starter, complete lies about Palestinians, complete lies about what it is Israel stands for. And those were coming out of his face pre-October 7th, and they've only gotten worse. And I don't know why he made this calculation or why he made that decision. But like I said, it's a red line for me and millions of others in terms of supporting him. But I will throw in here that we saw how aggressively the Democratic Party has done everything to, first of all, kick him out of the democratic process for the primary, which they've said in court, the DNC has, that they have no obligation to have a free and fair primary. They can pick whoever they want for the candidate. But they also threatened him that he was going to have to pay for the primaries, which would have been millions upon millions of dollars out of his own pockets. And they sidelined him in other ways, forcing him to be an independent candidate. And now to keep him off the debate stage, where it should be a percentage of polling, and he should have been on that debate stage, they've changed the rules and moved them up to June and changed the rules saying he has to be on a certain number of ballots. Well, guess who decides whether you've got enough signatures to get on the state ballots? Democrats in power in those states, and they say, oh, we haven't decided yet. So therefore, RFK was not allowed on the debate stage, but we knew they would do anything they need to find a way to stop him from being on that stage.
And yet they say that the Democrats say democracy is on the ballot, but they're trying to keep people off the ballot. Not just RFK, but the Green Party candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, an old friend of mine, the person I'd vote for if I was an American. They've done everything, including court action, to try and keep candidates off the ballot, whilst claiming that democracy itself is in question in the battle between Biden and Trump.
Yeah, you could drown in the amount of hypocrisy being spit out by these con men and con women. They absolutely have done everything they can to stop third parties from getting on ballots, to stop them from getting on the debate stage. Allow me to remind everybody, and I was with her the night before, with Jill Stein the night before in 2012, when she tried to attend the debates that included Obama and Mitt Romney, because she was running for president. She was on the ballot in 85% of the United States of America. She showed up at the debate, and they arrested her and chained her to a chair in a basement at a police station for 8 hours until the debate was over, and then released her into the night like a common criminal. This is the free and fair democracy we have in the United States. If a third-party candidate just tries to attend a debate, she didn't create any violence, she didn't harm anyone, she didn't punch anyone, she showed up and they arrested her and chained her to a chair. That is the democracy, and I just would hold up that image as the democracy of the United States.
Land of the free, indeed. Finally, Lee, and there's unlimited comedy potential in this next question, but we must observe proprieties. Is it, if they get rid of Biden, is it Big Mike Obama? Is it Hillary dug up from her political grave? Is it teeth and hair, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California? Who do you think gets the gig if Joe gets the push?
I mean, I've said for a couple of years now, it seemed like Gavin Newsom was running for president. Even while not running for president, he's been on every TV channel trying to show that hair off to the world for months and months now. So, I would put my money on him, except that Apparently, in these internal calls, the Democratic leaders have been saying that if Joe Biden steps aside, the money and the apparatus will basically be inherited by Kamala Harris, according to bylaws. And if that's the case, well, then I don't know. Maybe they push her, despite the fact that her polling numbers are, just slightly lower than those who enjoy herpes. But yeah, I don't actually know which one it'll be, but I don't think any of them will do anything good for America. I can tell you that much.
You mean Kamala Harris, what can be unburdened by what has been? I mean, this woman is certifiable. Laughing gas Harris, I call her. She seems to have a need for a huge peal of inappropriate laughter after everything that she says, funny as it is.
Yeah, those clips, those montages are tough to watch. There's something unhinged about her. And I guess if you are trying to represent a dying empire that kills millions around the world, and you're trying to say how wonderful and democratic it is, I guess some of that could seem pretty funny if you were the face of that, because of how insane and unhinged it really is. But otherwise, I don't know why she's laughing.
No, I think you need to move over here, although it might soon be time for both of us to move somewhere else. Lee Camp, comedian and commentator extraordinaire, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now the audience gets to come and have a go if they think they're hard enough. Katie Miranda is in Oregon. I've never been in Oregon, Katie. I'm very glad to make your acquaintance. Go ahead, please.
Hey, George. Excuse me, I'm recovering from the flu.
Go ahead.
Have you considered a run for prime minister?
Well, we don't have that
And
system,
if so, how
Katie.
would you end the
I
wars?
wish if we had a directly elected prime minister, then definitely I would, and I'd get some millions of votes. But we don't have that system. We have a very exclusivist system where it's first past the post in each individual constituency, and the leader of the group with the largest number of constituency members of Parliament, they get invited by the King. We've got an unelected head of state. I bet you wish sometimes, looking at your elected ones, that you had that too. We have a very undemocratic system, even more undemocratic than yours, if that's possible for you to believe. Sorry I interrupted you. What else would you like to say?
If you were elected prime minister, how would you end the wars in Ukraine and Palestine?
Well, I don't think we could end either war unilaterally, but we would end our involvement in them. If I were the prime minister, we would withdraw from NATO. NATO is the fundamental problem in the Ukraine. The endless expansion eastwards in defiance of the promises made to Gorbachev by the American administration at the time of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. NATO is at the heart of the matter. So if I were Prime Minister, it would be no to NATO. We would stop our involvement in the Palestine question, but that would not expiate the deep blood stains that will forever mark us for our role in the creation of the whole Palestinian disaster in the first place. It was our Balfour Declaration which began all this mess, and more than 100 years later, we are still supplying weapons and intelligence and shilling for giving diplomatic cover to a genocide. And we've just wrecked the intention of the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to get arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. Just at a stroke, without a by your leave, without a headline in any British newspaper, Britain put a document into court which ineluctably means that this matter cannot be considered again for more than 12 months, by which time Netanyahu may no longer even be there. And God knows how many Palestinians will have been killed. So we couldn't stop both those conflicts ourselves, Katie, but we definitely would stop our involvement in them. Thanks for the call. Sam Bear is in Alaska. Sam, welcome.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I've got a question. It's an election year. I will be casting my ballot this year for Cornel West. He's on some state ballots. I studied some history in college, and I learned that the only book that Abraham Lincoln read to become a lawyer and pass the bar was Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. So when I was at work 2 years ago mending fishing nets, I listened to the book on audiobook on YouTube. And I learned that there was a law in England that had to do with the monarchy. And if a person in England opposed the monarchy in any serious way, this law came into effect. It had a Latin name. It was called the law of the writ of praemunire, meaning if you were hit with this law, you were removed from what's called the king's protection. So whatever you tried to do in life, it wouldn't succeed. And this seems to describe the current phenomenon in our Western civilizations, the way the politics works, also in society. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, it's
and
an
ask you if
interesting
you...
one. I must say I haven't come across it before, Sam. I've never counted much on the King's protection, although when I was re-elected to Parliament a few months ago, I did have to pledge my undying allegiance to him and his heirs and successors, sight unseen in many cases. So there is a barrier, at least to sit in Parliament. If I were to be honest and say that I oppose monarchy, that I am a Republican, I seek an elected head of state, I would not be allowed to take my seat in Parliament, even though I'd just been elected to it by my constituents, by my electorate. So it's a pretty big contradiction. But as to that Latin named sledgehammer that you talked about, I'll have to keep an eye open for it. I don't know if it's coming my way or not. Jack Hadfield is in England, in Manchester. Jack, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you to be on. Yeah, it's great to be on. So my question is that looking at your manifesto, both the Workers' Party and Reform, that you both recognise the problems of both mass and illegal migration, obviously including the small boats crisis. And in your manifesto, you commit to increasing naval patrols in the English Channel, as does Reform as well. But Reform, however, they also state that 0 illegal immigrants will be allowed to resettle in the UK. Given you recognise that you said these problems with illegal and mass migration, would you also commit to deporting all those who broke the law when coming into the country? And if not, why not?
Well, we oppose both illegal immigration. I can't see how anyone could support illegal immigration. Seems barmaid to me. If you don't have borders, you're not actually a country. You're not actually a state. And if you have borders, you cannot allow people to penetrate them illegally. So that people are in your country, you don't know who they are or from where they came. So ipso facto, we are opposed to illegal immigration, but we're also opposed to mass immigration because the clue's in the name. We are the Workers' Party, and it is not in the interests of the workers, whatever color they are, wherever they came from, however they pray, it's not in the interest of the workers to have an unlimited number of competitors for the jobs. That can only lead to a rise in unemployment amongst the workers and only lead to a diminution of their wages and conditions. I was once someone who negotiated with employers. If I had gone into our manager and said, we want an increase of so much per hour, and he said to me, I've got 10,000 people outside the gate ready to work for less than you're getting now, so take your wage demands and pack off, that would obviously be bad for the workers. So we are against mass immigration. We want our own workers to be sufficiently trained and properly paid so that they can do the jobs that are being filled by the mass immigration which continues until this day. We also oppose it for a different reason. You might call it a diametrically different reason. We believe that the best and the brightest from the Philippines or from Kenya or wherever they're coming from, they should be building up their own country. They should be using their skills and the energies that they have to make their own countries more successful and wealthier. And the third and differentiating feature between us and reform, and I suspect from you, if I infer your question correctly, is we are opposed to the wars that set the refugees on the move in any case. If we had not attacked Iraq, if we had not attacked Afghanistan, if we had not attacked Libya, Syria, and so on, Somalia, if we had not attacked these countries, there would not be so many of them on the move as refugees, falling victim to the crime gangs that ship them over the English Channel at great expense to them and subsequent great expense to the British taxpayer that has to keep them in a hotel room until their claim for political asylum has been adjudicated. So some similarities, but more significant differences, I would say. Thanks for that question. Shahid Mahnavi is in London. Let's hear from him. Shahid, welcome. I beg your pardon, Shahid.
Good afternoon, Mr. Galloway. My questions for you are, firstly, how will you actively challenge and rectify any instances of discrimination or bias against Palestinians within the UK political system?
Well, first of all, the Palestinians within our system are represented in our party in great numbers. I lost count of the number of Palestinian origin British citizens that we have running for Parliament on Thursday, but it's a significant number. It'll be 5, 6, 7 maybe of our candidates are Palestinians, and that's easily the highest of any British political party. And of course, our identification with the Palestine question is virtually total. And it's not our choice that so much of this election has been about Gaza. We would have preferred to be fighting it on British economic issues, the health service, the state of our economy, and so on. But the genocide that's going on makes it impossible to ignore. What kind of people would we be if we did not address a genocide? And I'm always amazed at the journalists that ask me in an aggressive and hostile way why we are talking all the time about the genocide in Gaza. I always put to them, would you, if you were interviewing me in 1940, be condemning me for going on and on about the Holocaust? And if you did, which of us would look better now in history? You condemning me for raising it or me for raising it? But the discrimination of which you speak is a part of the whole pattern of anti-Arab, anti-Muslim prejudice that exists within the state at different levels in the open as well as under the counter. And it's not going to get any better, whoever is Prime Minister on Thursday, unless it's me, and that's not likely. It's not going to get any better under the Labour leadership, which is as hostile to Palestine as Rishi Sunak's Conservatives are. So count on us is all I can say. You can trust me. After all, long before you were born, maybe even before your mother was born, I was a champion of the Palestinian people. Thanks for the call. Paul Smithers is in London. Paul, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Galloway. Mr. Galloway, I'm probably better off speaking off the cuff, but I've got mild Tourette, so I've decided to write a letter. I might be less in danger of swearing. So I've just penciled down a bit of a question here for you. So I'm going to read it out if you don't mind, and I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Yeah, okay, as briefly as
Dear
you can.
Mr. Galloway, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I've been a long time admirer of your work. Your sincerity and honesty are a beacon of light in these troubled times we're living through. I love tuning into Mort. It gives me zen, and God bless your health. With all that aside, I would like to know your thoughts on how a working class revolution will be spelled. It needs to be spelled.
Well, I
look
don't
back
think...
to Glastonbury.
yeah, thanks, Paul. I've just read quickly your question, and I get it. Just for the sake of brevity, I don't think there's going to be a workers' revolution in Britain, at least not anytime soon. I don't think the British do revolution. When I saw the other night that Bolivia has had 200 coups, changes of government by overthrow, I marveled that the last time we did that was in the middle of the 17th century, and it led to the king getting his head chopped off, but then his son, being in a very British way, restored to the throne, and business more or less as usual resumed. And there has been no revolution in Britain ever since. The French Revolution came and went, and 1848 was a year of revolutions throughout Europe, but it did not touch Britain. So I have long ago concluded that the British are not going to have a revolution, and that therefore change through the existing democratic system, which hopefully we can gain a majority to amend, to reform, will have to be the way forward for the British people. You talk about a working class revolution. Our organs of working class power now in 2024 compared to what they were in 1974 are truly astounding. In 1974, there were 16 million trade unionists affiliated to the TUC. My union, then the Transport and General Workers Union, had more than 2 million members in one union. And the union leaders were a power in the land. Nothing could be done in the land without squaring them off first. Just compare that, 1974 with 2024, a period of just 50 years, and you'll see how far away from a workers' revolution we are. Charlie Simpson is a youth MP in Ashfield, in Notts, and he's very, very welcome. Fellow parliamentarian Charlie, welcome.
Thank you for the invite, Mr. Galloway. I've got a question. I hold some quite controversial political views. What will the Workers' Party do in terms of bringing in laws, in terms of bringing in laws to protect us young people from being shunned by our teachers and by our students and being refused education just because we have different views to what is meant to be normal?
Just give me an example of what you have in mind. I could think of one or two myself, but give me an example of what you have faced.
I won't name the teacher or the subject, but I have quite views which I say. For example, I said I'm against. I am against allowing immigrants to come to the country, illegal immigrants, and we need to clamp down on it. I was called rude. I was said I'm not allowed to hold them views. I was called every name under the sun because apparently we need to be a welcoming country. So which I responded to, what about the 2.2 million people we let in every single year? So this is just a scenario that I have to deal with.
I mean, I suspected that's where you were coming from. If you put the prefix illegal in front of the word immigrant, then no teacher can punish you for that, because that's the policy of every single political leader standing in this election. If you think about it, reverse it, it's always a good thing to do. If you put that in reverse, what would that statement sound like? I am in favor of illegal immigrants. Obviously, nobody in their right mind is in favor of illegal immigrants. What I'm worried about, and you did give me reason to worry about it, is that you didn't put the prefix illegal in. And that what you've been saying is that you're against immigrants coming to the country. Now, you must understand that that is a qualitatively different statement from the one you hurriedly corrected yourself in making. Illegal immigrants and immigrants are two different things. I, myself, would not be here if not for my grandparents' immigration from Ireland. Jude Bellingham, that saved England last night in the European Football Championships, would not have been able to score that glorious overhead kick and keep England in the tournament if being against immigrants had locked him out, because he is the child of immigrants. Where would we be in Britain if not for the immigrants? Well, I know where you as an Englishman would be. You'd be out of the European Football Championships. Let's go to London. Alex Akonan is in London. Let's hear from Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
My question is quite simple. Since 2019, we've experienced with Tories cuts in terms of the policies, and we had austerity since 2019. After 14 years in powers, in what state is our economy in the UK? Is the country better off or worse off?
Well, some people are fantastically better off. Most people are not, and many people are very greatly worse off. But I have to correct you, the austerity didn't begin in 2019, didn't begin even when the Tories came in 2010. Austerity began in 2008 under the government of Gordon Brown. And the conditions for the collapse of the financial system that led to the austerity, the bankers' crash of 2008, was set by Tony Blair's government over the preceding decade. The recklessness of financial deregulation, the light touch that they applied to the goings-on in the banks, made inevitable a crash in the financial system that almost brought down the entire country, almost brought down the entire financial system. And similar recklessness with their alter ego in the US under Bill Clinton, who repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, which forced banks to separate their activities between normal household and small business banking and the speculative subprime enterprises that they were engaged in with the rest of their money. The repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, the light touch regulation of the Blair-Brown era, made absolutely inevitable the collapse in 2008, from which we are still suffering. So some people have done very well. The people at the top have done very well. The people in the middle have not done well at all. And the people at the bottom have done, in many cases, catastrophically badly. In my own constituency, 45% of the children, almost half of the children, are officially living in poverty. And then there's the fuel poverty on top of that. Then there's the choice between eating and heating in this glorious, globally warmed summer, July, that we are enjoying, where I've actually got a vest and an overcoat on. The winter time was even worse. The reality is that our people are suffering, and they're suffering because the main parties are all wedded to exactly the same economic policy. They argue as if it was a fierce difference of opinion about a penny on this or a penny off that. But they are both absolutely hooked on the same economics as Biden and Donald Trump are. Thanks for that call. Father Frank Gelly is up next. Father Frank, always a pleasure. What would you like to say?
Dear George, it's lovely to see you again. First of all, I want to assure you of my prayers for your own re-election.
Thank you.
I'm praying for you daily.
Thank you.
And I would be tempted to come up to your constituency and campaign in person
I'd love
for
that.
you, but I'm only afraid that the appearance of a crazy clergyman might actually damage your chances, so I will not come physically.
You're welcome anytime,
but my
Father.
question
Anytime.
Is, my question is a bit quixotic and perhaps self-serving, and I suspect you won't like it, because I think I've heard you speak about that before. So my question simply is, why are politicians in this country, British politicians, so afraid to do God? Since the days of Tony Blair, when he wanted to end a speech with God bless you, he was told by his spin doctor, we don't do God. And it seems
well,
to
his
me,
spin doctor was
actually,
possibly Satan himself in the form of Alistair Campbell. So plainly, Alistair Campbell wouldn't do God. He did the devil. But you're right. I am a very unusual member of Parliament who openly speaks of their faith in God. I gave a quote to a British newspaper today, and they called me up to say, did you really mean what I think your answer says? That's how unusual my answer was, talking about the virgin birth and so on. It is the situation in this country that the devil is far more prevalent than God, and they openly cavort with devilish ideas, with their, naked parades and all the obscenity that we are seeing this month in Toronto and in other parts of the world. They are easily able to identify with the hell that is being visited on the children in Gaza. Hell hath no fury like what is happening. It is the seventh circle that we are seeing in Gaza, and all of our British politicians are easily able to accommodate it, if not openly to identify with it. I saw a child who consisted now of a head, an arm, and a chest, and all of the rest had been severed. A child. I saw it with my own eyes, but most people never saw it because it has never been reported anywhere, and no politician has spoken of it or of all the other scores of thousands of children that have been subjected to this hell. Father, you will always be welcome, and I do hope to see you soon. Thanks for the question. Ian Gibson is in Mexico. Who wouldn't want to go to Mexico? Go ahead, Ian. How's your new president?
I'm not in Mexico, George. I wish I was. I'm in Scotland, mate. No fair share.
Well, it says
I'm just
Mexico
calling to
here.
ask you,
Go
on your
ahead.
opinion on Brexit, how would you deliver Brexit? And what is your opinion on the ECHR? And would you leave the ECHR if you were in power?
Well, I supported Brexit, as you know. I was one of the leading campaigners for Brexit, but we argued throughout that Brexit was necessary, but not sufficient. It was necessary to leave the European Union in order, excuse me, to be able to do the things that we need to do in this country to drag us out of the hole that we are in, which we would have been forbidden to do. I mean, if you forgive me one example, our steel industry is now going out of business. We're about to be the country that started the Industrial Revolution and ended with literally no steel industry. Now, the European Union did not allow us to subsidize our own steel industry, did not allow us to invest in it outside of the competition rules that they had set, would not allow us to favor British industrial products either before or after saving our steel industry. In other words, we couldn't force all our police cars to be made of British steel, to be made by British manufacturers. We could not force our shipbuilders to use British steel, and we could not subsidize our steel industry to keep it going in the macroeconomic interest of the country. But when we left the European Union, under these clowns, we didn't do any of those things either, even though we had now the power to do them. We have the power to do anything we like now that we are outside of the European Union. The problem is we have a political class that has no interest in doing so, and moreover, which it turns out did not want to escape from the vice-like grip of Mrs. von der Leyen and Mr. Borrell and the European Union in order that we could be a free and sovereign country. They wanted out of Europe so we could be in the United States, so we could be the 51st state of the United States. That was their idea of taking back control, taking it from von der Leyen and giving it to Joe Biden. Talk about out of the frying pan into the fire. So my answer to you is that we have not actually Brexited. Sure, we have signed on the dotted line, but we have not taken a single action, neither in foreign policy nor in domestic policy, which actually shows that we are no longer in the European Union. I'm going to Mexico, whether you like it or not. Charles Stanyon is there, and I'm very glad to see him. Charles, welcome back.
Hi, George. Good afternoon. And I too am sending prayers for your victory in this upcoming election and for your Workers' Party.
Thank you.
Lee Camp set up kind of where I'm going with my question. Lee Camp gave you a lot of good information there. And I'll cut straight to the question. Would you think I was bonkers if I told if I thought that the Uniparty, which is certainly the United States government, if they, it would see, I had an epiphany last night that they are actually designing, skewing this election so that we only have one choice, which is Trump. I mean, why else would they put up the walking corpse of Joe Biden and make him die a death of 1,000 cuts on stage the other night? It seems almost deliberate that they control both parties are skewing this election, so we are forced to have Donald Trump. I myself would love to see Dr. Joe Stein up there.
Absolutely correct. The Uni Party is the Democrats and the Republicans. It is Labour and the Conservatives. But Trump is a bit of a wild card. That's why they've put all this legal lawfare pressure on him to make him realize that if he does get in, he's going to have to play ball with the interagency swamp, the three-letter swamp, CIA, FBI, and all these other agencies. Secondly, it's why they are going to insist that, just like last time, he surrounds himself with the creatures of the swamp. I mean, what kind of draining of the swamp can you expect when you make John Bolton the head of your foreign policy? When you make Mike Pompeo your Secretary of State? These are the creatures of the swamp. And they will seek to do that with him again. They may already have done so. I saw Bannon being led away to prison. Maybe they'll never let Bannon out because he at least seems to realize that a Donald Trump presidency surrounded by the same creatures of the swamp isn't going to do America or the world any good. It will do them good. There'll be quids in, but it will not make the difference to the world that we need. As I said earlier, if I had a vote, it would go to Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party, because she is the only candidate that any respectable person, politically respectable person, could vote for. A person of intellect, a person of morals, a person with vision, and a person with the kind of stature that could restore some, at least, of America's lost political capital in the world. If you elect Joe Biden again, you're making yourselves a laughing stock. And if you elect Donald Trump again, then people won't know whether to laugh or to cry. Matthew Alford is in Bath, in England. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Hi, George. I was interested in electoral reform and also in reform of electoral processes. I noticed that the Workers' Party has been excluded from various television debates. And I was just wondering if you think it's realistic or possible, what your position is on that kind of reform during the electoral process, and also whether that can perhaps transfer into a more democratic, more proportional representation.
Yeah, I've always, we're running out of time, Matthew, otherwise I'd get into it more deeply, maybe another time. But I've always supported proportional representation, even when the beneficiary of its alternative. And I put to both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, at the height of their electoral success in 1997, that now is the time to introduce proportional representation. You have a landslide majority with which you can do it. And if you do, I made the point to them, the Tories will never have a majority government again. And you might not have a majority government again, but we'll have a more democratic polity in which parties and policies are properly negotiated in accordance with how the people have voted. Well, we'll have to continue that, Matthew, another time, because I'm quite out of time. I'd like to thank all those who didn't get on the show. I promise we'll prioritize them next time. If you want to be on that video wall, kindly write to us at www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. I hope you enjoyed the show.